Welcome, y'all. Welcome back to Joey Show Nashville. Well, today's kind of a special episode. I happen to be in Murfreesboro, Tennessee at the Stone River National Battlefield. And before you dismiss this video and say, oh, I don't want to see a history video or a Civil War video, just know that this video isn't going to be about the battle itself. It's going to be about more of a personal level story about a relative of mine and stories that have been passed down through the generations. And he happened to be a soldier here in this battle. So stick around and I'll tell you a bit about the story. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks. Now this area here was affectionately called the slaughter pen. There's a big story about it, but what they thought was going to be a great cover hiding in these, the Union forces were all hidden in these rocks and used them for shelter, but it turned out to be their undoing, and a lot of people were slaughtered here. This place has great historical significance. Now my great-great-grandfather had a first cousin who was here. That would be Amos McGowen. And Amos McGowen was 21 years old. He left his home in White County, Tennessee when he was 14 to go to Memphis to cut wood for the railroad. He cut wood for 6 years before the war started up. When the war started up, he came back home to White County. Then he went up to McMinnville, where he enlisted in the Confederate Army as a private. Now, he saw a few skirmishes at the beginning, but nothing that could have even prepared him for what he experienced here. This was his first real battle. And in fact, this battle turned out to be one of the bloodiest Civil War battles up to this point in the war. And many people were lost here, many lives. Boys, you must get out of here. You are surrounded. Many of the men who fought here had seen the huge slaughter pens of Chicago's meat packers. When they saw so many dead and wounded men stacked here, the soldiers called this place the slaughter pen. The jumbled rocks you see here sheltered the 4 Union regiments of Miller's brigade during a hard 2-hour-long fight. Rebel bullets whined and ricocheted, wounding many of the men in blue from Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, grimly held on tight inside the limestone labyrinth. Then General Sheridan's troops, who had been fighting on your right, ran out of bullets, broke ranks and ran. General Negley called for a retreat as waves of gray-clad soldiers threatened to overwhelm his men on 3 sides. This stone stronghold turned into an ankle-twisting death trap. As you can see, all these plants and bushes all kind of grow in and around these rocks. So not all of it was cleared, so definitely you could break your ankle here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this isn't just like a skirmish between, you know, even hundreds or 200s of men. This is thousands and thousands of men charging here, shooting at them, surrounded by 3 sides and running out of bullets. The Union forces were overwhelmed and they kind of got separated from the rest of them. So, must have been, probably felt like it was the end, right? Now the Confederate Army had been encamped here most all of fall and early winter. They had put up a few skirmishes in the meantime, probing towards Nashville, but Nashville was pretty much given away without a fight. So they regrouped here because it was a railroad stronghold, and it was kind of like the gateway to Chattanooga, which had to be protected at all costs. So while they were here, Amos had a lot of stories to share because he had a lot of free time. He camped with 18 men, which was all they allowed the groups to camp in along the Stones River. He told some pretty interesting stories, and when I get down there, I'm going to share them with you. Sheridan saves the day. By the middle of the night before the battle, General Sheridan saw signs that the Confederates might attack near here. By 4 a.m., Sheridan had visited all 3 of his brigade commanders. He gave orders for his men to be fed an early breakfast and then made ready to fight. Other Federal divisions further to the south did little to prepare themselves for the onslaught. At dawn, the Confederates struck. Whole regiments in blue dissolved. Thousands turned and ran. Sheridan kept his men under tight control as they pulled back one regiment at a time. Here, Sheridan's men held the line for 2 hours, battling until they had no more bullets. Sheridan's skill and will to fight brought General Rosecrans enough time to put his rattled retreat units into a strong new battle line near the Nashville Pike. There was no sign of faltering with the men, only cry being for more ammunition, which unfortunately could not be supplied. Now this battlefield is huge, and it's hard to tell exactly where the troops are with the lines without seeing a map. But this area here looks like a supply area because there's a lot of wagons. So let's read what's on this placard. On came the sounds of battle. Struggling bluecoats, falling back, came into view through the trees. They were loading and firing as they retired. They passed over our line and laid down behind it. The order of battalion rise up came like an electric shock. The brigade was by some mischance short on ammunition. Some companies had not more than 20 rounds. The Confederates were near at hand. Suddenly their lines seemed to burst through the thicket just in front of us, commenced firing, and our volleys were fired into them. Men were dropping here and there, and others filled the vacant spaces. The Army of the Cumberland, a brigade of pioneers, handled all the Army's pick, shovel, and axe work for building roads and bridges. Officers picked 2 men from every company of every regiment in the Army for this duty. Many of the men who lined up to fight here on this knoll had been carpenters or miners in civilian life. What they had never done before was trained to fight as a unit. Their leaders did not know if they would stand or fight, or break and run. This battle line of untried road builders held fast and stopped the massive Confederate assault. So can you imagine, you're just basically like a road worker and a bridge builder, and you're working for the Union Army, and you're way in the rear, and you don't think that you're in any trouble at all because the real army's out there fighting somewhere. So you're all sitting here building stuff, and then you hear people running towards you, and you look just in front of you, which is out behind me there, and you see major amounts of Union troops running through that thicket at you as fast as they can. Some of them wounded, some of them are slowing down to turn around and shoot as they run, but they're running. They all run past you, and then they fall down and hit the ground behind you, kind of like your home base or your safety. Well, what they did is they picked up their guns, they lined up, and they shot, and they kept the Confederates at bay. Right here they made their stand, and it must have been something unbelievable to witness. I'm glad it wasn't me. Amos McGowen was often heard to boast there was not a Yankee maid who could kill him. One of the first battles he encountered was the infamous 9-day Battle of Stones River near Murfreesboro, Tennessee. From December 31st, 1862 to January 2nd, 1863, the story picks up near the end of the major conflict prior to the Confederates under General Braxton Bragg making one final push in hopes of routing the Union's left flank. The line of Confederate troops, comprised of a group of men primarily from the 22nd Infantry Battalion, closed out the far right flank of the entire rebel defense. With its strength compromised by the lack of troop numbers and artillery support, this group managed well just to hold its own. All this was soon to change, however. It occurred during a cold sleet storm when the men took refuge along a gorge area held in check by an opposing Union artillery line. The company was on the verge of surrendering this position in favor of reconsolidating their numbers elsewhere when an officer on horseback came riding through. As he passed by, he yelled, "Cheer up, boys. Breckinridge is coming, and he's bringing 600 of the best trained men in the South." Soon after, the order was given, "Draw your bayonets." With the support of reinforcements, the company of men surged ahead on the offense. As the group approached a battery of Union artillery, the defenders dropped their weapons and abandoned their positions, not at all desiring any hand-to-hand action. Taking possession of the cannons, the Confederate men turned the guns around in no time, started loading and firing towards the fleeing Yankees. Before joining in pursuit, some men took time to jam the gun barrels with logs and chains, rendering them useless. Chasing the retreating Union soldiers as they moved up the hill, Amos stopped to rest near the top. At the ruins of an abandoned farmhouse now serving as a depot for casualties from both sides, wounded soldiers could be heard crying out for water. No sooner were they administered to this than to only have it spill out of their open wounds. Amos specifically recalled a conversation he had with a fatally wounded Union officer lying propped up. The man had been treated for a bullet wound passing through his entire abdomen. The standard treatment for such a body wound was that a silk cord would be drawn through the body. This would serve to only prolong life for a short time longer. As Amos approached the man, he spoke out, "You daring boys, you charged right into the face of the cannons." Before Amos left, the officer told him that he had a wife and child at home that he had hoped he would be seeing before dying. With tears in his eyes, Amos said that he hoped he would too. Now I'm currently walking in the same area or the same ground as Amos McGowen would have walked. This is the banks of the river, and they camped out all along this river here. And this particular part of the river was General Bragg and his Tennessee Volunteers, which means that his company would have been right along here. I'm assuming that they were the farthest up, so I'm going to walk up a little farther to see where they might have had camp.
We came through Raleigh, now on to Gettysburg. Heard shots in the valley, so I wrote you down these words. I traveled in the 4th Regiment, my brothers by my side. Our captain.
How about that? I found the exact spot they were camped out. It's amazing, man. That's my blood that was here all those years ago, back in 1861. 21 years old. Amos McGowen. Now, from what I understand, while they were camped here, there was a few incidents that took place. Now, the Union troops, they had a lot of food and they were very well supplied from Nashville. So while they were sitting here, right across the river there, they could smell the food, smell the fires with all the great tasting food, but they had very little to nothing to eat. So what they did is they would send people out scrounging around the local farms. Now, some of the farms were controlled or owned by Union sympathists, and so they kind of picked on them. Now, one of the local farmers had a milking cow that kept getting free from his barn, and needless to say, it kept wandering through the camp. And so Amos McGowen one day saw the cow and he saw it needed to be milked. So his canteen was empty and he figured, why not get some good fresh milk? So he went up to the cow, he started milking that cow. As he was milking it, he could hear the farmer coming into the camp, and the farmer was yelling for the cow. But every time the cow started to move, he would say, "Sa, sa," and the farmer would say, "You, you," and the cow would start to go and he'd say, "I said sa, sa." So he kept milking that thing until he filled his canteen full of milk. At that time, the farmer got to the camp here, grabbed the cow, took it away. Needless to say, that cow never showed up at this camp again. Now, another great story is not long after that, they were starving to death. All they had was what's called blue tack or blue beef, which is just nasty, nasty dried beef. And they had a little bit of cornbread left, and they were drinking water out of this river here. So one day a big fat hog walked in. He started making himself at home in the camp, wandering around amongst the troops. And these guys are starving. And they were told specifically by their commanding officer, Captain Taylor, do not, and I repeat, do not kill any of the livestock that belongs to the local farmers. Well, they kept coaxing each other, the 18 men in his unit, because that pig would not leave. So eventually, when Amos McGowen went on duty to guard at night, they talked him into it. It didn't take much finagling. He took his gun, he shot that pig. After they shot the pig, they took it, they tied its legs up and tied it and threw it in the river right over here. They let it sink in the river, and just about the time they got all the blood covered up and threw dirt over it, and he was marching again guarding the tents, 4 officers rode up on horseback asking where the fire came from, the shots. Now, being as all the guys were hungry, they decided not to say a word, so not one of them said a word, and they asked him, he said, I have no idea. Then one guy who was asleep over on a tree opened his eyes, and he told them, you know, a while back I thought I heard some shots up the river there a ways. And so the officers weren't really satisfied. They rode their horses around the camp looking for any kind of evidence, and they couldn't find any, so eventually they left. Now, after they left, they pulled that pig out of the water, and they found an old metal tub, okay? They took this old tub that was all rusted and used for washing clothes. They took sandstone from over here. They scoured out the inside of it to get rid of the rust, and then they skinned the pig. They took all the guts and the skin of the pig, and they tied it to a rock and threw it over here in the river. Then they boiled that pig, and then they sent off a boy after a collection to go get more bread. When he got back, the pig was just about done. All 18 of them finished that entire pig in one sitting, and they used their cornbread to wipe out the fat of the pan. And none of the officers were any the wiser. So that's just another interesting story of something that happened to him here. He was in the Tennessee Volunteers, 22nd Regiment, Company G. Anyways, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot more stories. And if you like this video and you're interested and want to hear more of Amos's stories throughout his experience in the war, leave a comment below and I'll be happy to make more videos like this. Anyways, if you liked it, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Hopefully you had as much fun watching it as I had making it. It was really kind of exciting to see where one of my relatives was during a really historic time in our nation's history. You know, it was a different time, and I'm not one to judge. So, yeah, that's history.